Hiya and welcome to the next lesson with the research methods topic. Today we're going to be focusing on case studies, but before we get into that, I did just want to revisit the practice exam question from the previous lesson, as some of you completed this and I was quite impressed by the answers you gave. However, many of you struggled with this, and that's quite understandable because it was quite a tricky question. So I do just want to revisit that before we go into the case studies. So I've just annotated the item for you here to give you some indication as to the sort of things you could have answered for this question, as well as reminding you of what those ethical factors are. So the question, let's just relook at the question, was from item A, identify and describe one ethical issue that the researcher would need to consider when investigating children's lives. So obviously the item here was from the National Child Development Study, and when looking at the study, we should be able to identify a range of possible ethical issues that would arise when undergoing this study. So let's just remind ourselves of what the ethical issues are. So deception, so if someone is deceived or lied to about the purpose of the study, and this is really relevant when we do covert observation. Risk, so when the research could harm the well-being of respondents, so is there any psychological harm that could be evoked here? Informed consent, so this is when the researcher has obtained the permission of the respondents to participate, and they've also offered the participants the right to withdraw whenever they wish. So obviously, if we haven't actually obtained informed consent from our respondents, then we can see that we're going to firstly be deceiving them, so deception is going to be there, and we're also going to be risking the well-being of our participants. So we might be inducing psychological harm. And then finally, we've got privacy. So are the findings going to become public? Does the research go into quite personal issues? Does it invade the privacy of respondents? So when we look at privacy, we're thinking about, are we going to ask the respondents some really quite personal questions? And if we are we going to make those findings public? So, are we going to maybe replace the real name of respondents with a pseudonym, so a pretend name, in order to protect that privacy of the respondents, and so on and so forth. So these are some ethical factors that we need to consider when we do the research. And when I read through this item, I could identify a few ethical issues, and I've highlighted them in blue here to sort of guide you through this process. So let's just readdress the item firstly. So it says, through each stage of your life, you have adapted to a changing Britain, making your generation a very special one. The purpose of the National Development Study is to document your experiences and the lessons they teach us, so we can help improve the lives of future generations. So let's just pause there. You'll see that I highlighted this section here, to document your experiences. And I've put here, an ethical issue could be informed consent. Does the researcher have the informed consent of the respondent to document their findings and use them to inform further policies? Okay, we don't know whether or not they've got informed consent. We'd like to assume they do, but we don't know that. So an ethical issue that we as researchers would have to consider here is we need to get the informed consent of our respondents and their approval and permission to let us document their experiences. Let's continue. We share what we learn from your experiences with government and service providers. Now, I've highlighted that entire sentence in blue because I see that as being quite a strong ethical issue here. And that ethical issue is privacy. So I'll go across here and I've said, yep, ethical issue, privacy. This seriously invades the privacy of respondents as their data is being shared with government and service providers. Therefore, is there risk to participants? So I've said that yes, because we're invading their privacy, but because we're sharing their data with government and service providers, that could also then give us the ethical issue of risk. So it's sort of two in one here. Because we are invading privacy, we could then be seen as invoking negative risk on our respondents. Let's continue. Our aim is to inform policies and services that will help make life better for your generation and younger ones too. The National Child Development Study is the second in a long line of cohort studies, following generations of Britons born in 1946, 1958, 1970, 1989 to 90, and 2000 to 2001. By comparing the experiences of generations, we can track how life in the UK is changing. And you'll see here that I've also put an ethical issue of risk. So having someone follow, analyse and then document your life can be quite upsetting, especially if you've been through some challenging situations that you'd rather forget and let go of. This can therefore cause risk to the well-being of participants, as they could find this potentially distressing. So, imagine if you've been through quite a traumatic experience in life. However, the effects of that experience are going to be documented and followed up upon by the researchers, and then obviously they're going to be written out as a report in full. So how could that potentially evoke some risk? So I've spoken in detail here about a few ethical issues you could talk upon, and I just wanted to do this because I really want you to understand how we can sort of start to look at items such as this and identify ethical issues in this case, and maybe in a few lessons time we'll look at maybe more practical and theoretical issues and how we can apply them to a question. So here you will see that we have got the same item and the same practice exam question with the same sentence starters I gave you last lesson. So now I'd like you to pause me whilst you maybe readdress the previous slide, look at the sort of ethical factors that you could discuss that we identified from dissecting the item, and then complete this essay, this exam question in full using the sentence starters to help you, and then when you're finished that we can move on. But I just wanted you to revisit this as a sort of starter activity because I want to mark what you produce on this. So just pause me as you complete this. Okay, great, well done. So now let's move on to the main content of the lesson. So as I previously mentioned, this lesson is going to be on case studies, and we've got three main learning objectives for this lesson. The first one is to simply be able to describe what a case study is and why sociologists use them. The second one is to explain the advantages and disadvantages of case studies. And the third and final one is to be able to evaluate the usefulness of case studies in research. So what is a case study? A case study is where sociologists investigate in great detail a particular individual or social group. So this idea that case studies involve going into a lot of detail can be suggestive that case studies often echo this notion of longitudinal studies. They can go on for extended periods of time. And a key word here that we need to make note of and remember is this word triangulation. And triangulation is the use of more than one method in social research. So for example, a researcher might combine structured interviews with more in-depth interviews. They might also use structured interviews with observations and so on. So therefore, triangulation is often used to verify the validity of other data sources. Now we've already established that case studies is when sociologists investigate in great detail a particular individual or social group. And I mentioned that it can be going on for an extended period of time. So because they want to investigate in great detail, they might think that one simple interview isn't enough. So they want to then go further into their research by using an additional research method, and that could be observations or focus groups and so on and so forth. So case studies often involves this notion of triangulation, combining one or more research methods together in order to verify the validity of other data sources. They might have done a questionnaire and thought, okay, I want to really check that my responses are valid. I'm going to check the validity of them by seeing if a focus group will confirm these findings. So, why are case studies so great? Case studies are often longitudinal. This means that, and I would like you to finish off this sentence. What does it mean for a study to be longitudinal? So pause me now as you just simply finish that sentence. Well done. So another reason of why case studies are so great You can use more than one research method. So as I just stated, for example, you might choose to observe your sample on Monday morning using observations, write up your findings on that observation, and on Thursday, you might choose to hold a focus group with the same sample and ask them questions based on the observation. From this, you might choose to create a questionnaire to give to your sample. This means you can get qualitative and quantitative data. This is because case studies use triangulation. The data I get from my observation can then be compared and tested against the data I get from my focus group. This will enhance the validity of my data. And a task for you now is to explain how in the box below. Why does triangulation enable me to enhance the validity of my data? This isn't a question I want you to go onto Google and research. I want you to just use what you've learned so far. Okay, what you know of the word validity, what you've learned of the term triangulation, and then tell me why triangulation, the combination of multiple research methods, can enhance the validity of someone's research. And in this yellow box just here, I would like you to write the answer to that. So just pause me as you do that. Okay, great. So let's move on. So this is a case study by Paul Willis, and it's called Learning to Labour. And this case study, I'm going to introduce you now to sort of demonstrate what case studies are and to use it as a basis to ask you some questions on case studies afterwards. But it's also a really key case study that you're going to need to know and remember as we work our way through the Sociology GCSE course. In particular, you'll be looking at it in a lot of detail when we come to do the Sociology of Education in Year 10. So this is a really good time to now get ourselves familiar with it. So, Learning to Labour by Paul Willis is a study of 12 working class lads from a school in Birmingham, conducted between 1972 and 1975. He spent a total of 18 months observing the lads in school and then a further 6 months following them into work. The study aimed to uncover the question of how and why working class lads get working class jobs and use a wide range of qualitative research methods from interviews, focus groups and participant observation, aiming to understand the participants' actions and points of view in everyday contexts. Participant observation allowed Willis to immerse himself into the social settings of the lads, and because he did over-observation, he was able to ask the lads questions about their behaviour. He also did follow-up questions in interviews and focus groups. So, his case study was definitely longitudinal because it took place between 1972 and 1975, and he spent a total of 18 months observing the lads when they were in school and a further 6 months following them in work. And we could argue here that his research was seriously valid, had really high validity, because he incorporated such a wide variety of qualitative research methods, enabling him to get a really strong understanding of their behaviour and the meanings behind it. However, you can notice from the sample, it's a relatively small sample, and that might highlight issues of representativeness. 12 working class boys. So that might highlight issues here of representativeness. Would we be able to use Willis's study to represent all working class lads in England? No. Also, you could argue that his research was low in reliability. Okay, low in reliability. And remember, reliability is this idea that if we repeat the study, will we get the same results? He did not use quantitative research methods, so that suggests that the research would be very low in reliability. So here we've got quick fire questions, and here you're going to be referring to PET factors when you identify one disadvantage of Willis's study and one advantage of Willis's study. And here at the bottom, the success criteria says that you must refer to one PET factor of your choice in your answer. So remember, we've got practical factors, ethical factors and theoretical factors. Practical factors, we've got time, resources, access, money and the personal skills of the researcher. ethical issues, we've got deception, risk, informed consent, and the privacy of researcher. And of course, theoretical factors are validity, reliability, and representativeness. So just pause me as you work your way through these questions. So I'd now like you to continue with your focus on Paul Willis's Learning to Labour and reread the information about Willis's study and tackle the 3 bullet points. So the first bullet point is asking you to simply summarise the study. The second bullet point is saying, why do you think Willis used a case study for his research? And then finally, I want you to use this case study to help you fill out the table on the following slide. Now, I want you all also to attempt the challenge question. Are there any ways you could improve his study and justify the answer? So you all need to be attempting to do this challenge question. It doesn't matter if your answer is not spot on. I want to see your thought into this. Okay, I want to see you giving this a great deal of thought. So now let's refer to the table on the following slide. So very similar to when we did longitudinal studies, you've got a range here of practical, ethical and theoretical considerations that you need to give to case studies. So based on what you've learned from Willis's study, can you please maybe look at all of these different factors for practical, ethical and theoretical and place them into the appropriate columns? So are they advantages or disadvantages? And just pause me as you do this. Now again, this is a really good task to sort of get you thinking more about this notion of strengths and weaknesses, because this time you have to justify your answer. Now, too many of you in the previous lesson simply left out this justify box, and that's the reason I've put it back into this lesson. And I've put, do not leave this out. This is a really crucial task in enabling you to demonstrate to me that you really have a good understanding of the strengths, weaknesses, practical, ethical and theoretical factors involved in case studies. If you're not sure, that is fine. I don't expect you to be experts on this, but you need to give it a go. Okay, if you don't give it a go, I can't assess your understandings and then there's no real learning taking place. So you need to give this a go. So pause me as you work your way through all the statements, decide whether the statement is a strength or weakness, then further decide whether that strength or weakness is a practical, ethical or theoretical issue, and then justify why you're saying that. How do you know that it's practical, ethical or theoretical? So just pause me as you do this. Okay, great. And now to wrap things up for this lesson, we've got an exam practice question which I'd like you all to attempt. The exam practice question is, outline and explain one strength of using a case study to research women's experiences of domestic violence. So at the bottom here, you've got the success criteria that I'd like you all to follow. Firstly, you need to refer to the context of the question. The question isn't just asking you to identify and explain a strength of case studies. It's asking you to outline and explain one strength of using a case study to research women's experiences of domestic violence. So you have to think about case studies in the context of the question that is given. Also, I'd like you to refer to one pet factor of your choice in your answer. So you could refer to validity, reliability, or representativeness. You could refer to deception, risk, informed consent, or privacy. You could refer to time, resources, access, money, personal skills of researcher. I don't mind which one you refer to as long as it works. Okay, does it work for the context of the question that's given? Does it work when we're discussing women's experiences of domestic violence? And I'd like you to use the sentence frames given. If you have any questions, please do get in touch via email and I'll be happy to help you as much as you need. Best of luck completing this. Please complete all answers on the PowerPoint and submit when finished. Thank you.